Hinterkaifeck was a small, isolated farmstead located near the town of Gruber in Bavaria, Germany. The property sat deep in farmland, surrounded by forest. The nearest neighbors lived over 500 meters away, far enough that screams or disturbances would not easily be heard. The farm belonged to Andreas Gruber, a strict and controlling man known locally for being difficult. Living with him were his wife, Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's two children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Josef, and a new maid, Maria Baumgartner. The previous maid had quit 6 months earlier, claiming the farm was haunted. She reported hearing footsteps in the attic and strange noises at night. Her concerns were dismissed. In the weeks before March 1922, Andreas Gruber told neighbors about several disturbing incidents. He discovered footprints in the snow leading from the nearby forest to the farm, but none leading away. He heard footsteps in the attic at night, but found nothing when he searched. A set of house keys disappeared. A newspaper appeared on the kitchen table that no one in the household had purchased. Despite these warnings, Andreas did not inform police or request protection. He reportedly believed he could handle the situation himself. On the evening of March 31, 1922, events unfolded quietly. Investigators later concluded that the killer lured family members into the barn one at a time. Each victim was struck with a mattock, a heavy farm tool. The attacks were brutal but controlled, suggesting familiarity with the environment. Autopsy findings revealed that Victoria's daughter had survived the initial blow for several hours, pulling out clumps of her own hair before dying. After killing 4 members of the family in the barn, the murderer entered the farmhouse. The maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had arrived only hours earlier, was killed in her bed. The 2-year-old Josef was murdered in his crib. There were no signs of forced entry. This is what makes the case deeply unsettling. Evidence showed that the murderer remained on the farm for at least 2 to 3 days after the killings. The cattle were fed, meals were prepared, bread was cut, the fireplace was used, someone slept in the house. The bodies in the barn were stacked and partially covered with hay, indicating deliberate action rather than panic. By April 4th, neighbors became suspicious. Smoke was no longer rising from the chimney. No one had been seen. A neighbor, along with 2 others, went to the farm. They found the bodies in the barn and alerted authorities. At this point, critical mistakes were made. Villagers, officials, and curious onlookers freely entered the property. Evidence was trampled. The crime scene was completely compromised. Autopsies were performed inside the barn, further destroying forensic evidence. The attic was not immediately sealed or searched thoroughly. The murder weapon was found on the farm, cleaned and hidden, but by then fingerprints were useless. Police investigated multiple suspects: Victoria's former lovers, neighbors with personal disputes, traveling criminals, even the maid's husband. None could be linked by evidence. At the time, forensic science was limited. There was no DNA testing. Witness accounts were unreliable. Investigators never fully explored whether someone had been hiding in the attic before the murders. The early warnings, footsteps, missing keys, unexplained newspaper, were not taken seriously until it was too late. By the time police considered this possibility, the attic had already been contaminated. In 1923, the Hinterkaifeck farm was demolished. Any remaining physical evidence was destroyed. The case was reopened several times in later decades, but without physical evidence, no conclusions could be reached. The Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved not because the killer was brilliant, but because the truth was erased before investigators understood what they were looking at. Someone knew the farm, someone stayed among the dead, and someone walked away into silence. The unanswered question remains: if the signs were there before the murders, why were they ignored?